Welcome to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. I'm Zach Kaufman here with my good friend Ryan D'Amico.
Lead us off. Where are we going to start?
We're starting with the Thursday night game, which seems so long ago at this point. So we'll briefly go through it. The Packers moved to 3-1. Beating the Bears, who are now 1-3. They beat them 35-14. Not a real close game. Aaron Rodgers stood out with 4 passing touchdowns. Jordy Nelson had a good game for him. He had 75 yards, and 2 of those passing touchdowns went to him. And then the other guy I wanted to bring up here that really stood out didn't have an outstanding game, but he's going to be important moving forward, and he's a guy I'm looking for in 2 of my fantasy leagues where I lost Dalvin Cook. But Aaron Jones had to step up when the Packers had injuries to both Ty Montgomery, their starting running back, and Jamal Williams, their backup running back, that Aaron Jones had to come in. He had 13 rushes, so didn't get a lot of work, but 49 yards and a touchdown off of that. And it's very likely that he's going to get some work moving forward and have to be relied upon. So I know we were talking before the show how we both have some shares of Dalvin Cook in different fantasy leagues, and this is one of the top free agents I'm looking for to replace him. I know I have one league where I have a lot of running back depth, and I'm not as concerned about. Another league, I'm really hoping I can get Aaron Jones because Dalvin Cook was all I had at running back.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's definitely something I'll be looking at too, for sure. Like you said, we both had Dalvin Cook in one of our leagues. You had him in a couple, so I'll definitely be looking that way. Another piece that we get from this game is because Chicago and because Mike Glennon looks so poor, we get Mitchell Trubisky starting on Monday night for the Chicago Bears. It'll be a home game for him. They'll be hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Nothing like starting your NFL career against one of the better defenses in the league, but this gives them some extra time to prepare. I thought if they were going to do it, this is a pretty good time to do it. You have the extra few days because you're playing on Thursday night the week before, and you played Monday night the previous week, so you're getting even an additional day because you're playing on Monday night. So be interesting to see Mitchell Trubisky this week in his first NFL start. I, for one, it was not a big Trubisky supporter. Didn't think he'd be all that great in the NFL. So I'm interested to see what he's gonna show.
I'm very interested as well. This is our third high pick that's now starting at the quarterback position. We already have Deshaun Watson, who we'll get to him. He just had a monster game. Deshaun Kaiser, who's had some struggles. Unfortunately, he's playing there on the Browns, a much lesser team than the Texans. And now Trubisky's being added to that. So we'll see how that goes for them. And it's also interesting, like we talked about in the preview leading into the season, how much the Bears invested in Mike Glennon to now sit on their bench. And that's got to be hard to deal with as a Bears fan, or especially anybody in that front office.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zach, how about the just kind of influx of young quarterbacks in this league? I mean, you looked at 2 drafts ago, 3 now, with Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, kind of what they're doing, even Derek Carr. Then you look at last year's draft with Carson Wentz. He started all of last year, and he's looking really good again this year. Jared Goff finally coming into form a little bit here, at least so far in this young season. And then, like you mentioned, the guys this year. I mean, there's a lot of young, talented quarterbacks that are kind of trending upward, and now with these young guys getting their start in the NFL. So I'm interested to see how those young guys continue to pan out.
I agree. And one other from this past draft that doesn't look hopeful for much time at all, Patrick Mahomes there in Kansas City, the only undefeated team remaining.
Right.
He was another guy that's supposed to be very, very good. But with Alex Smith playing well, with the team playing well, doubt we'll see him unless there's a significant injury.
Absolutely. And Smith's a free agent for next year. A lot of the talk is that he'll obviously go elsewhere, if not retire. I've even heard that angle. So it looks like it'll be Mahomes' team next year. So we'll be interested to follow that story as we go out through the course of the year and into the offseason.
We'll see on that. If the Chiefs keep playing like this, I'd be very surprised if Alex Smith would retire at this point. But we'll see moving forward whatever happens with Mahomes. And he's in a good situation to learn on a good team there and kind of develop to be in a position of someone like Aaron Rodgers, who came in and was ready to play after developing behind someone like Brett Favre. Obviously, Alex Smith is no Brett Favre, but it's still good to have that chance to develop and get used to the NFL game before he's forced into action.
Absolutely.
So we're moving on to our only shutout of the week. Miami didn't show up to play once again after being blown out by the Jets, barely scoring at the end of the game. They lose this week 20-0 against Miami. The number one highlight player for sure for me, Alvin Kamara, came in and had a big game. He only had 5 rushes for 25 yards, but out of the backfield, 10 targets, caught all of them, 10 receptions for 71 yards and a touchdown. They definitely like him. They're using him a lot. Mark Ingram's got more of the carries, but Kamara's the one making a lot of plays for him. And he's definitely looked good early on. As we already talked about some of the rookie quarterbacks, we've also had a strong rookie running back class from this past draft, as he's another one that's definitely contributing well.
Yeah, Kamara is really doing some nice things, and he's really kind of taken away from Adrian Peterson out there in New Orleans, because Mark Ingram obviously is a guy that does a little bit more than Adrian Peterson as far as catching the ball out of the backfield, so that kind of implements him into one of those running back spots. And Kamara, Sean Payton's come out and said that, look, Kamara's going to see the field and going to see a lot of plays and see a lot of touches, and he did that. He saw a lot of 5 carries. He made him count 25 yards, and then he had 10 targets, caught all 10 of them. So, he's really trending upward, and that really kind of doesn't bode well for Adrian Peterson, a guy that I think you need to keep your eye on as we approach the trade deadline, which is at the end of October. So there's some teams that are losing some running backs that could possibly look his way, perhaps. So, As far as this game, though, man, Miami, I mean, where do you start with this team? I mean, offensively, this team is in shambles. I mean, you scored 6 points last week. You gained 225 yards, most of them in garbage time. And then this week, you don't even surpass 200 total yards, and you get shut out. I mean, yes, that's part like players, but to me, that just screams coaching. I mean, coaching. The talent that this offense has with Ajayi and Parker and Landry, Julius Thomas, I mean, they have guys that should be able to make plays. I know that your quarterback is Jay Cutler, and he's not a world beater, but you need to be able to find a way to put these guys in the position to make plays. And Adam Gase is not doing it, and is failing miserably right now. So, they got the Titans on deck next week. Let's see how that goes. But I'll tell you what, Miami's a missed field goal away from being 0-3, and they are not looking good at all.
Right, and it's across the offense, like you mentioned, that Ajayi he's been disappointing, but Jay Cutler throwing for less than 200 yards. This just is not a team I'm looking forward to watching at all. And it's looking very, like you said, they barely won that first game against San Diego. It's looking very downhill from this point for them.
Absolutely.
So we're moving on to a battle of previously winless teams here. Cincinnati played Cleveland and ended up winning 31-7. Not a close game. They had it under control from the start. Andy Dalton finally does some good things after having some struggles early on, although you give it an asterisk because it's against the Browns. So we'll see if he can continue that against any more legitimate teams. But he threw 4 touchdowns. 2 of them went to Tyler Kroft, the backup tight end, since Tyler Eifert wasn't able to play, which is a name that hadn't really popped up until this right now with their first victory of the season.
Yeah, but look, my big takeaway though, man, has got to be Andy Dalton. I mean, really, what Andy Dalton has done since this team has changed offensive coordinators has been fantastic. Now, look, right, against the Browns this past week, the first game, though, it was a road game against Green Bay, nothing to sniff at there. You look at the two games since they switched offensive coordinators for Andy Dalton, 498 yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. Dalton's kind of finding a groove right now. Let's see if that carries over. Would have been nice for the Bengals if they could have found a way to beat the Packers in that game. And instead of 1-3 right now, they're looking at 2-2 and a more, a better situation and could a hole you could possibly dig yourself out of. 1-3 is tough, but the offense is kind of starting to hum a little bit here. We talked about it in our AFC breakdown, Zach. This offense has a lot of weapons and should be able to score points. And now with the change in offensive coordinators, looks like they're finally doing that. And Cleveland, I don't have anything to say about Cleveland. I thought they'd be a little bit better than they are. They're 0-4. And the sky is blue and the grass is green. I mean, what else is new?
And they're just so unpredictable in who's going to be productive. Rashard Higgins had a big game a couple weeks ago. Now he has 0 catches, didn't do anything. Same thing all the way through their receivers. There's a quote I saw that Kenny Britt would have been benched if they had anybody to put in for him. So just – and they do this every year with their free agent signings. Before that, it was Dwayne Bowe that they paid lots of money to not do anything and to be bad. And this is the first year of his monster deal he signed in the offseason. So they just continue to be exactly what the Browns are and very poor. One thing I'm keeping an eye on is the Cincinnati backfield, where they've still got all 3 guys they're using, Joe Mixon, Jeremy Hill, and Giovanni Bernard. Bernard had a good game coming out of the backfield. He caught the ball. He caught the ball well, caught it consistently. 3 receptions, 67 yards, and had a touchdown through the air. None of them really did much on the ground. But one thing that's significant to me, another rookie running back, this one hasn't stood out very well yet, but Joe Mixon did get 17 carries. Unfortunately for him, he averaged under 2 yards per carry with only 29 yards. Didn't really do much, but it does give some hope for him producing in the future that they're definitely feeding him the ball. So if he can start to make some plays, he could be someone to keep an eye on moving forward as this team continues to improve. Like you mentioned, with the new offensive coordinator, their offense has been better, and he's someone that could definitely benefit from that.
Yeah, he's going to. I mean, he's led the team in carries each of the last 3 weeks. You mentioned he had 17 this weekend. He had 18 the weekend before. So, I mean, he's the guy. It's pretty clear right now. And he's really talented. He'll obviously probably get things going. So if you're a mixing guy and you have him on your fantasy team, I think he's the guy you need to kind of keep in there as things continue to go forward.
And we'll move from an up-and-coming rookie running back to a previously high-up running back who is now out for the season, which is unfortunate. This is a Detroit Lions versus Minnesota Vikings game where the Lions pulled it out in a very low-scoring game. They won 14-7. The biggest news from this game, unfortunately, was superstar rookie Dalvin Cook, who has been fantastic, had a season-ending injury. Like we mentioned, hurts both of our fantasy teams there. So we're trying to make moves to fill his spot. Going into this week, he was the number 2 rusher in the entire league behind another rookie running back, Kareem Hunt. And it's so unfortunate to see this. He started out good early. He had a touchdown. He only rushed 13 times at 66 yards, averaging more than 5 yards per carry. He's just been so impressive, and I really hope he can come back and continue to be just as good as he was. Since it's early in the season, I do have hope that he can come back again next year and start again right where he ended up finishing this season, unfortunately, very, very early in the season.
Yeah, it's a shame, man. I was actually had that game on when that injury happened, and it was just one of those patented non-contact injuries. He went to cut, and as soon as he went to cut, he grabbed his knee right away, and you kind of knew that's what the injury was going to be. And you feel for the guy. I mean, he's been battling injuries kind of his whole career, and at Florida State, he battled with a shoulder injury, and it's a shame because he was definitely looking like the real deal and a guy that the Vikings made the right decision trading up for in the second round to go get. So you obviously wish him a speedy recovery. And look, 2 of the guys that really stood out for the Vikings in this early season have battled injuries now. Sam Bradford, who looked great opening night. You haven't seen him since. And now Dalvin Cook's out for the year. So a Vikings team that had a lot of promise to start the year is in a little bit of trouble here at 2-2 now. Not entirely all their fault, but still, those are the breaks, injuries in football. Flip side, though, for the Lions, man, this team keeps winning. They keep rolling along. They're 6 inches away from being 4-0. If that play last week doesn't happen against the Falcons, man, this team's 4-0 and is in really good shape in their own division. They're still in really good shape, but the one thing that I take away, Zach, that I think it needs to be the biggest, takeaway from the Lions this season is the balance that this team is having. I mean, they had a great split. I remember 2 weeks ago on Monday Night Football against the Giants, where they ran the board more times than they passed. And then on Sunday, they rushed the ball 28 times, only passed the ball 31 times. So you're seeing more of a commitment to the run game, which is not something you've seen in years previous. Usually it's just Matt Stafford sitting back there throwing the ball 50 times a week. That's not happening now. And I think you're seeing more wins because of that, because they're more committed to the run, because they're controlling the clock a little bit more, keeping the defense off the field more. I think the Lions have a really good recipe for success, and I'd be interested to see your opinion. I think this is a team that can be dangerous going forward. I really believe that.
I'm still not sold on the Lions. I just haven't seen the consistent production throughout their team. It's a lot of times they'll have one guy explode. This week it was Amir Abdullah with a big game. He just hasn't consistently.
Isn't that a good thing, though? Isn't that a good thing when you can have multiple, like any person step up week after week? Like it could be Amir Abdullah, or it could be Marvin Jones, or it could be Golden Tate. I mean, Eric Ebron. It could be anybody. I mean, isn't that a good thing, though?
I do agree with that it is a good thing. They have a lot of weapons, but they don't have standout weapons that I think can really be relied on to be a takeover kind of player. When you get to the playoffs, when you're competing against the top teams in the league, this is a Vikings team without their starting quarterback. They still have a good defense, but that's mainly what they're relying on. And I'm not sold on this Lions team yet. They're better than what I expected. I agree with you. They have better balance than they have before. But I just don't see that they can hang with those top teams because they don't have that consistent production anywhere. Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, they're good players, but they're very up and down players. They're not someone like they've had in the past with the Calvin Johnson that they can rely on in pressure situations and count on when they really need plays made.
Sure. No, I totally see where you're coming from for sure. I obviously kind of like Detroit a little bit more than you do, but yeah, look, this is definitely a team. Look, Detroit and the Lions haven't had much to cheer for over the last for their whole freaking existence in the NFL, for goodness
since Barry Sanders.
Yeah, and even then, he was a great player on a bad team. So yeah, let's see kind of where Detroit goes. They're sitting pretty at the quarter point here. We're quarter of the way done through the season, and they're 3-1. So if that holds serve, they finish the season at 12-4. Not a bad record. So yeah, where are we heading to next?
We're heading to some upsets next. We had a couple this week. First one, Atlanta Falcons losing to the Buffalo Bills.
I knew that would make your day.
We talked about last week how wrong I was when we went into the season. I was saying Atlanta would have a Super Bowl hangover. They were one of 2 undefeated teams heading into this week, although they've had 2 very, very close wins. And this is one they could not pull out against a surprise Buffalo Bills team who's now 3-1. That really, I don't think many people at all saw that coming, that the Bills would be 3-1. Very few people. This was another I talked about with my survivor pool. A lot of people got knocked out picking Atlanta in this game. That it was very hard to see that coming here. And the standout player for me on this Bills team, Charles Clay, has just been so consistent at that tight end position. I have him on one fantasy team where I drafted Kyle Rudolph originally, and he's been a disaster without Sam Bradford being there in Minnesota. He just hasn't done much. Charles Clay, 5 receptions, 112 yards this week. So consistent. They're relying on LaShawn McCoy. He had another very, very solid game there. And it was enough to put him over the top. One thing, like I mentioned, which is one of my number one reasons for thinking that the Falcons would struggle this year, is Matt Ryan. He had some turnovers. He had a fumble, which was recovered, returned for a touchdown. And right
which
after,
is an awful call, by the way.
It was
terrible call.
It was a weird call there. But he followed up immediately after that by throwing a long interception. So his turnovers definitely hurt him this game.
Yeah, for sure. You kind of took the wind out of my sails there, man. I was going to give you a little kudos there and a pat on the back because, you obviously talked about the Falcons not having a good year, but you said the biggest reason why you thought that was going to happen was because Matt Ryan was going to take a step back, and you haven't been right on the Falcons so far. They're 3-1, but yeah, you've been spot on with your Matt Ryan prediction. This is a Matt Ryan who is only completing 63% of his passes, 1,109 yards. And 5 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. That is not a good touchdown to interception ratio there, obviously. And look, this was a game that if you're the Falcons, I mean, you might look back on and be like, damn, if we could have only beat the Bills at home early in the season, maybe things could be a little different for us, because there was a game where they really should have had. Because I'm still not 100% sold on the Bills. Maybe I should be. Maybe this will be a surprise team of the year. We'll find out. But I'm
telling you, you should not be sold on this Bills team.
I agree. I mean, I'm not sold on them at all. But I mean, who knows? I mean, every year there's 1 or 2 teams that surprise people. Maybe it's the Bills. I don't know.
I agree that there's teams that surprise people. I think this is an impressive win from Buffalo. I'm not taking anything away from that. They 100% earned it. I just don't see it moving forward. They just don't have the high-end talent that they need. And especially, we were talking about it earlier before the podcast started, they lost Jordan Matthews now. Not even a great receiver, but their top receiver. That he's going to be out here, and they're going to have to rely more on someone like Charles Clay, who's been very solid, very reliable, and an excellent player for him. But I just don't see a team being good based around Tyrod Taylor, Charles Clay. And I have a huge respect for LaShawn McCoy, but if anything were to happen to him, this team really, really drops off.
Yeah, I'm on the same page for sure. I'm not a big Tyrod Taylor supporter. I don't think he's a quarterback that's going to take a team to the playoffs. So, you chalk it up as kind of one of those games. Look, every team basically in the league except for the Chiefs has kind of had one of them games where, look, you lose a game that, most other weeks you win. I mean, you look at the Steelers, they lost to Chicago a couple weeks ago. I mean, it happens. It's the NFL. There's build up for it to be parity, and for, they always say any given Sunday, anything can happen. So we saw that on Sunday for sure in the Atlanta game.
Yeah, we've seen that almost every single week with some major surprises from week to week. And we'll get right into another one. Caught me by surprise. My Dallas Cowboys taking a loss to the LA Rams. The 3-1 LA Rams. Another huge surprise team there. They were
3-1 last year too. At this point, I didn't even realize that until I heard it the other day. They're 3-1 at this point last year.
I had completely forgotten about that. I know they really dropped off after that point.
They did.
But this year seems a lot more hopeful, and not just because they beat the Cowboys. That they have Jared Goff's taking steps forward. Todd Gurley, just a fantastic game there. He rushed it 23 times, 121 yards on the ground, and then through the air. 7 receptions, 94 yards, and a touchdown, including a 53-yard touchdown there. He just – what a takeover player. Very, very impressive game there. This is a game I was hugely disappointed. Unfortunately – where I was, it wasn't on TV. I didn't have access to it. I had to drive home from Pennsylvania anyway. I was feeling good with Dallas up 24-13 at half, and just kept updating and updating on my way home, seeing the lead slip away. The Rams got the lead. Cowboys took it back. And then Rams close out the game, and took this win. So I know this is a game you watched, so I'll hand it off to you for your analysis from what you saw there.
Yeah, look, this was a game that Dallas got up early. I mean, Dallas kind of did what you want to do as a home team is get up early and take away any hope that a young up and coming Rams team has that, hey, look, we can go on the road and beat the Cowboys. They get up early, and I thought, okay, here we go. Here's the Rams coming back down to earth. Dallas, getting a big win here at home. Doing kind of what Dallas does after two kind of games that the loss to the Broncos, and then kind of a struggle sort of last week or 2 weeks ago against Arizona. And then all of a sudden, the Rams just come back with a vengeance, and Goff hits Gurley down the seam late in that game to give them the lead. And then ultimately, that was the difference maker as Dallas can't come back to complete the comeback. It falls short on the last drive of the game there. And with the Rams, I mean, you look no further than Jared Goff and Todd Gurley. That's the only two places you need to look at right now. Goff's completing 67% of his passes, just over 1,000 yards, and 7 touchdowns to only 1 interception. What a great split that is. And then you look at Todd Gurley, 86 carries for 362 yards, 4.2 yards per, and 4 touchdowns. I mean, the two reasons why this team is where they are is Todd Gurley and Jared Goff. And if they continue to play like this, this is a team that will definitely be a fierce team heading forward in a division that's definitely kind of winnable at this point for sure, with the way Seattle has been playing. So I think the Rams. I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly, Zach. More hopeful this year than it was at this point last year. So definitely, I think they have some positive signs moving forward. As far as your Cowboys go, though, man. I don't know where to kind of start with them. I mean, this is kind of the third game in a row where you kind of just shaking your head, wondering, like, all right, well, who are the Cowboys? Like, who are they at this point? Like, okay, like they got back to the run a little bit this week. I mean, Elliott had 85 yards, had a touchdown, had a receiving touchdown. His yards per carry, though, is continuing to be low, 85 yards on only 21 attempts. So, you wonder when he's going to finally get going. The offensive line hasn't looked as dominant as it was last year. The biggest takeaway, though, for me, though, is I think Prescott. I mean, I think Dak has – look, 8 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, not a bad split. But my biggest thing is he doesn't seem to be, like, pressing the ball downfield as much as he was last year. I don't know what the reason for that is, but as I've been watching them this year, he just isn't pressing the ball downfield. And I think that, in my opinion, I think that's kind of limiting the offense a little bit. But defense obviously didn't hold up their end of the bargain here. What is the one thing that you put your finger on? They're your team. I mean, what's the big reason why the Cowboys are 2-2 and are not living up to expectations so far?
Defense. We talked about it going into the season. This is why even being a Cowboys fan, could not see them as the top team in the NFC. And their defense they outplayed who they are last year. They impressed me. They were better than I expected. This year, they were missing Sean Lee this game, and it showed. They just give up what feels like everything. Like other teams can take whatever they want there. And it's been very disappointing. I thought they would take a step back. I didn't expect it to be quite this much of a step back, but that really hurts because I feel comfortable with where the offense is at. They're certainly not perfect. They kind of are what they are, where they don't really have a strong number 2. Bryce Butler scored a touchdown in each of the last 2 weeks, but they don't have a strong number 2 receiver opposite Dez Bryant to really spread out the defense. So they rely a lot on that running game. The offensive line's not quite been the outstanding best offensive line in the NFL like they have in years past, which is fine. I'm not concerned about a slight step back on that. They're still very, very good And I'm not worried about that as much. I'm really not worried about Dak Prescott. He makes some crazy plays to escape pressure and make passes downfield, which he did a couple times in this Rams game. But that defense has got to stop some people, or they're going to be just like this. They're 2-2. They're going to be a 500 team without some kind of help on defense.
Yeah, last thing I'll say about them, you look at the two teams that the Cowboys have played with a pulse this year, being Denver and the Rams. Denver scores 42 points. Rams scored 35. So definitely need to clean that up. And there's no rest for the weary, Zach, because Aaron Rodgers and company comes to town this weekend in a primetime 425 Fox game of the week at home. The defense definitely has their hands full again this weekend.
I agree. And we'll move on to a third upset in a row here. The Carolina Panthers moved to 3-1 with a 33.
How is this team 3-1? How? I don't get it. I really do not get it. This is the biggest anomaly. I could not wait to get to this game. I don't get how this team is 3-1. Maybe you can explain it.
My biggest takeaway, again, we talked about with Dallas, this Patriots defense is so bad. Every single week, no matter who they've played, they're giving up anything the offense wants. They are just destroying this team that we were expecting this to be 13, 14 win team, and they're already at 2-2. It's not like the offense had a bad game. Tom Brady threw for 307 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Their offense was solid. They kind of do what they do. But this Panthers team, they've constantly had disappointment at receivers, and both their top receivers had great games here. Kelvin Benjamin had 104 yards. Devin Funchess, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. That I really can't think of a time that I've seen where both those receivers had good games. A lot of times maybe one will have a good game and the other have 2 catches for 13 yards. That's one of the main calling points of these two receivers. At any week, they could have a 13-yard game and not really do much of anything. But Cam Newton led it. He had 4 touchdowns total, 3 through the air. 1 was a rushing touchdown. And this Patriots team, it's got to do something there on the defensive end that kills them.
Yeah, as far as Carolina goes, I asked why they're 3-1. Maybe, I think they obviously have been a beneficiary of a pretty easy schedule. San Francisco, Buffalo, New Orleans. The Patriots, they're not an easy game by any means, but the way their defense is playing makes it a little easier. But you tip your hat to Carolina. I still don't think it's going to keep up. They go to Detroit this week. That's a tough one. Let's see kind of where things go. They go at Detroit, and then they have the Eagles on a Thursday night game. So let's see how things continue here the next couple weeks for Carolina. Getting back to the Patriots, though, man, they are statistically the worst defense in the NFL. This team is giving up 32 points per game over the first four games of the season. If you would have told me that a Bill Belichick team was giving up 32 points per game, I wouldn't have believed you. And this is one of my biggest pet peeves is I've heard a lot of people, Patriots fans, national media, saying the whole adage it's Bill Belichick and it's the Patriots, they'll get it Look, I'm all for piggybacking on history and using that whole it's the Patriots, it's Belichick, they'll figure it out. I'm okay with that. When it's the offense, when it's Tom Brady, when it's that whole situation, this defense is just awful, man. And I don't understand. And you can't convince me that this team is automatically going to flip a switch and go from giving up 32 points per game down to giving up 17 to 20. An improvement for this team is going from 32 to let's start 32 to 25. Start with trying giving up a touchdown less per game. Let's just start there and then continue to try to get better and better, because this team is really in trouble defensively. Tom Brady can't outscore everyone. He can't do it on his own. He can't.
And like we said, it wasn't a game where he had turnovers or anything like that. He played well. The offense the offense did well, and they just can't get past much with a terrible defense like that.
I mean, it's bad when Brady goes down the field, ties the game for you, and there's like a little over a minute left, and you think to yourself, shit, there's way too much time left, and our defense is that bad that they're probably going to go down and kick a field goal. And that's what happened.
It is, and that was huge surprise there this week. Fortunately, that was another took a lot of people out of my survivor pool I'm in, and I picked Green Bay, so I'm still nice. Alive there. Slowly narrowing teams down.
Nice.
From some of those close games, we now move into a couple of blowouts we can move quickly through. First one, this is a game I watched. It was over from the start. Pittsburgh Steelers have an easy time with the Baltimore Ravens, 26-9. From the start, Steelers were up at all the way through. Le'Veon Bell had a really good game there. 35 rushes, 144 yards, and 2 touchdowns there. On the Ravens side, it was interesting for me to see that. I know we were joking around before the game about how bad Mike Wallace has been this year. I had one of my fantasy leagues. I'm really short on receiver, and I went to free agency to check out who's there. And Mike Wallace was one of the top owned players that was still available. And I clicked on him and I was mind blown at his stats. The first 3 games, 1 reception for 8 yards. 1 reception for 7 yards, 1 reception for 6 yards. And it seemed like playing against his former team, the Steelers, they just kind of force-fed him the ball. And I don't expect this to be a trend that continues. He got 10 targets, 6 receptions for 55 yards. Clearly nowhere close to the rest of his production. But I really think that was more a factor of him playing his former team, that they wanted to get him involved and create some kind of excitement with this offense. But it just didn't happen. This Ravens team is brutal. One thing I thought was entertaining about this game. I know I told you how in one of my leagues I picked up Alex Collins right before the game started. That was based off a report I saw that he was supposed to get more carries. For the second week in a row, he had the exact same rushing stats. Second week in a row, 9 rushes, 82 yards. Clearly, and that's such a weird number to run for.
Very.
But an average of 9.1 yards per carry, easily looked like the best back on that Ravens team. The only downfall for him, he had a fumble. So got benched for a little bit there, and that's going to hold him back. But he's a guy that the Ravens might have to rely on moving forward, because from what I was watching, there wasn't really much that moved the ball for their team except for him getting some long runs.
Yeah, they're going through an offensive funk just like the Dolphins. They're really struggling. I mean, they scored 7 last week, 9 this week. As expected with the Ravens, though. I thought this was going to be one of the worst offenses in football. It's starting to shape up that way after the first 2 weeks. Now they're starting to really kind of hit the lull and kind of see what a lack of weapons will do for you. Steelers, though, this is the Le'Veon Bell kind of coming out party. Look, they fed him the ball, they got him the ball, and gave him a pretty big workload, and he stepped up to the plate and kind of got his legs under him now. So that's kind of what you expected. You knew he wouldn't be held in check forever, so he kind of gets going. However, Antonio Brown wasn't happy with the I guess Antonio Brown's not happy when you go on the road and you beat your biggest rival 26-9, and your team's 3-1. I guess Antonio Brown, I guess that's not good enough for him. I guess he has to have 10 catches every week, because I thought that tirade on the sideline was a little juvenile, if you ask me. I mean, if this team was losing, if they were, if they're losing this game and it brings the record at 2-2 and things aren't going well, okay, I get it. You're pissed off. You're trying to maybe light a fire under your team, but I mean, come on. I mean, it was a blowout from start to finish. Your team is now 3-1. Antonio Brown, you're one of the best receivers in the league. Start acting like it.
I agree it wasn't the best display, but in his defense, he's one of the best route runners in the entire league. And on that play specifically, he shook the defender. Like nobody was close to him. He was wide open, and Roethlisberger didn't even look his way at all. Now, obviously, I'm not saying if that happens, you should go and throw a tantrum on the sideline, but he had a point, didn't make the point well, but he had a point that he was wide open, did not even get looked at there. And I really think they could have blown out this Ravens team worse than what it was if they make plays like that.
Sure.
And if they did that, the score could have ended up something like the Texans and Titans game, 57-14. Blown out. Houston Texans take that win. The highest scoring team of the week here, and it was just from the start. Deshaun Watson just dominating through 4 touchdown passes. Lamar Miller had easily his best game of the season so far. DeAndre Hopkins at receiver, 10 catches for 107 yards and a touchdown, had a very nice big game. And then Will Fuller in his return to playing had 2 touchdowns for them. So not a whole lot to discuss here. The running backs were bad. They didn't really get a whole lot of production. Part of that was they didn't get much action since Tennessee was down right from the beginning. But that's their most reliable players, and they couldn't even really use them. And that just led to a monster blowout here.
Yeah, and I mean with Houston, I mean they kind of developing their they kind of have that big 3, if you will. With Deshaun Watson and Lamar Miller and DeAndre Hopkins, and when they all 3 are kind of clicking, this is kind of what I guess you get. Now, obviously, Tennessee this game was just blowout city from the beginning. Tennessee couldn't get anything going, and then Mariota gets hurt, and that just kind of opened the floodgates there and whatnot. So, look, we talked about it in our AFC preview, and it's nice to see DeAndre Hopkins finally getting looks and getting targets and getting catches. I mean, this is when you have a player like him, you need to get him double-digit targets each week. You have to find a way to get him the ball, at least give him a chance. I mean, this is a guy now he's almost averaging, Zach, in 4 games, he's almost averaging 8 catches per game, which is fantastic. He's having one of the better years for wide receivers this year. 31 catches, 311 yards, 2 touchdowns. Probably wishes, I know, knowing DeAndre, probably wishes those the touchdown numbers were a little higher. But, yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say on this game, though, but it is nice to see Watson continuing to do what he does. Tennessee better hope that Mariota's not out too long. I know he's listed as day-to-day and should be okay, but and probably should play against the Dolphins. But if he misses any sort of time, like it flares up, that's not good news for Tennessee.
Yeah, and Hopkins, like you were mentioning, he's leading the league in targets. They just continue to throw him the ball this year after last year where whatever the problem was, Brock Osweiler wasn't giving him the ball even though he's the best player on the field. So great to see him getting some action. And obviously, such a great player producing with that. What a surprise.
For sure.
From there, we're heading to an overtime game that two teams, both are 2-2, which amazes me. The New York Jets, 23-20 over the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I just am amazed that this Jets team has 2 wins. They got a lot of production from 2 of their running backs. One of them I stashed in one of my dynasty leagues where we have a lot of bench spots, Elijah McGuire. That he's a guy kind of like, I don't know if you remember a couple years ago, Jerome Harrison was deep on the bench on the Browns. All of a sudden got some action towards the end of the year because they were so bad and just had a monster last couple of weeks. I've kind of been hoping Elijah McGuire's that kind of player since they have an old-timer in Matt Forte who's been around forever, and the Jets were expected to be really bad. So it happens like that all the time where they put in a rookie, Elijah McGuire, another rookie running back, and I didn't think it'd be this early in the season, but he has some great production there. most of it coming on a 69-yard touchdown run, but 10 rushes for 93 yards for him there. The starter ahead of him, Bilal Powell, 163 yards and a touchdown on 21 rushes. Just used that to kind of carry them. Robbie Anderson was their number one receiver with 59 yards. But this still, even though they're 2-2, this is not a team worth watching to me. Josh McCown, their starting quarterback, didn't even throw a touchdown this week. On the other side, Leonard Fournette, once again, another star rookie running back, had a good game. They fed him the ball 24 times. He rushed for 86 yards, didn't have a score this week, but also led them in receiving, 59 yards on 4 catches, and did have a score through the air.
Yeah, I was telling you before we went on the air is that I took him in one of my leagues and I'm relying on him as a rookie, and he's living up to the expectations. He's having a really nice year so far. Had a receiving touchdown on Sunday, and is really fitting in really nicely there in Jacksonville. The Jets, look, they took advantage of Miami, little struggles they're having with the win last week, and then beating Jacksonville is really nothing to get excited about this week in overtime. So the Jets, they'll continue to struggle as the year goes on. The two, teams that they've played that were, you say are good teams, at least at this point, they got killed by. So, I don't have much on this game. This is definitely one of them games that, unless you're a fan of either one of these teams, you're not watching much of, if any. I didn't watch any of it.
I certainly didn't either. And we're going to move to another game that I don't think was very watchable. This is the 49ers taking a loss to the Arizona Cardinals 18-15. Let me read you through the box score. Start out with a field goal, San Francisco. Field goal, Arizona. 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 Field goal, San Francisco. Touchdown, Arizona. Wait,
what was the last one? That didn't make sense. What is it? What's a touchdown?
Came out of nowhere there. This guy, Larry Fitzgerald, must know what he's doing. Finally scores the only touchdown of the game. But what a terrible, terrible, terrible stat line there. 5 field goals by the 49ers, 4 by the Cardinals, and then the overtime touchdown to Larry Fitzgerald to finally win it for the Cardinals and get us out of this game.
Yeah, that was a brutal game. I mean, all them field goals, that's pathetic. These teams can't find the end zone until late in overtime when Fitz finally says, all right, I've had enough of this. Throw me the ball. I'll go get it. We'll get it out of here with a win. So, we talked about him last week, what he did in his game last week. And look, and then he wins the game for Arizona this week. So, and I'm a little nervous, Zach. I'm not going to lie. Arizona goes to Philly this weekend. And it's a game the Eagles at home should win. But Larry Fitzgerald absolutely kills the Eagles. So I'm a little concerned about that.
This Cardinals team, they have a fascinating group of receivers. They seem like a strong group. They had Jerron Brown lead them in receiving yards this week with 105. John Brown was finally back. He had 47 yards. J.J. Nelson's had some big games. He only had 34 yards. And then Larry Fitzgerald, who had the touchdown, he only had 32 yards. But they're really struggling to fill in that running back position after losing David Johnson. That's really hurt him. Chris Johnson got the most carries. Andre Ellington got some carries, but between the two of them, they produced 50 total yards. Just not much to set up that passing offense and some of those weapons they actually do have.
Yeah, absolutely. Really missing David Johnson for sure.
So we'll move from that game into the team you said the Cardinals are playing, which is your Philadelphia Eagles, who barely pulled out a win here. The Chargers lose another close one here. I don't know what their losing margin is, but they have to have an average points that they've lost by that's probably around 2 or 3 points here.
3, 2, 14, 2.
Yeah, that's so close here, and they're 0-4. And fascinating game upcoming for them. They play the winless 0-4 New York Giants next week. So somebody's got to come out with a win here.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Look, the Eagles. Look, they turn out another win, and look, it wasn't easy, but look, going to the West Coast, taking on a team that hasn't won a game yet. I mean, those are difficult circumstances. I mean, it really is. I mean, that's kind of dangerous territory there for a desperate team and a guy in Phillip Rivers who plays with a lot of passion, a lot of pride. So he wanted to kind of get a win. Look, the Eagles is pretty simple. I mean, they committed to the running game again for the second straight week. Did it last week against the Giants. Did it this week against the Chargers, who coming into this game with the second worst rush defense in the league, and they kind of showed it. LeGarrette Blount kind of led the way, 16 carries, 136 yards, and then 26 more carries, 10 of which were to Smallwood, 10 of which were to Corey Clement, and then Wentz had 6 carries of his own. So between the 3 running backs, it's 36 carries. I mean, that's fantastic. That's what you like to see. You want to see them take as much of the pressure, if they can, off of Carson Wentz. And when Carson Wentz was called upon on Sunday, he looked good again. 242 yards, 1 touchdown to Alshon Jeffrey, no interceptions, no turnovers, which is obviously important. And look, the defense at times looked a little shaky, but for the most part, we're getting pressure on Phillip Rivers and created some turnovers, which are big too. Had a couple turnovers in this game, which as a defense, that's obviously a goal. You want to get some turnovers. We're able to do that. And they get out of there with a win. So, and I thought that game, I thought if the Eagles won that game on Sunday, which was, again, I thought it was really leery. I was a little uneasy with it just because it was against a winless team. I thought if they could win that game, it really sets them up nicely going forward and have a real possibility of being 5-1 going into their bye week, because they play Arizona this weekend, and then they have a Thursday night game at Carolina, which everyone kind of knows my opinion of Carolina at this point. And then, so now 4 of their next 5 are at home. So, I mean, things are really setting up pretty nicely for this Eagles team right now. They just got to keep taking it one game at a time and kind of keep doing what they're doing. And then, I mean, Fletcher Cox didn't even play on Sunday. They'll get him back. Ronald Darby will be back eventually. So things are kind of lining up pretty nicely for the Eagles. And we'll see what happens. But they're playing pretty good football right now.
I agree. I've been impressed with them. Another guy I've really liked. I have him on a couple of fantasy rosters. Zach Ertz continues to produce for that Eagles team. And then 2 guys really stood out for the Chargers this week at the receiver position. Keenan Allen finally really showing up. He had 5 catches, 138 yards. And then Tyrell Williams on the other side cost me a win in fantasy football. I was playing against him in one of my most competitive leagues. But he had 115 yards and a touchdown there in that game.
Yeah, that's brutal. They definitely did have some big plays there. Did LA. So LA, though, what a pathetic, kind of support or lack of support they're showing for their football teams out there. I mean, this is a stadium that only holds like something like 40,000, 50,000 people, which is not a lot for an NFL stadium, but it's actually a soccer stadium with the NFL team playing there. And they're actually like covering and blocking off rows of seats to begin with the game. Like that's pathetic. I mean, good God. And the way the Eagles fans took over that stadium, that got a lot of national publicity. Just not a good look for the NFL with moving teams to LA so far. I think the Chargers would definitely be in a better position if they were still in San Diego.
That's an interesting thought there, and I'm not sure what that'll look like. If that's something that'll develop over time, that people will start to get excited about these teams, or if it's just going to stay that way, that they're kind of adopted. Some of the NBA teams, I know a lot of people will make a big deal about Miami if they turn into a team like that ends up not really feeling like a home court. Sometimes it's got a lot of people that have moved there from other places, so they don't get some of the support as other teams do. So it'd be interesting to see if they can have some success and gain some fans in that area, or if it continues to be like this, that they're a home away from home for some of these other teams.
Yeah, the Rams and the Chargers, I mean, they're going to get new stadiums in the year 2020. So, maybe expect that to help a little bit. But it'll be interesting to monitor that year after year and see how that goes out. So, what's the next 4 o'clock game, Zach?
0-4 Giants. They took a loss to Tampa Bay Buccaneers 25-23. And this is a game, Jameis Winston, he's had some struggles early on in this season, but he has 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, threw for over 300 yards. Definitely looked a lot better there. I've been impressed with Jacquizz Rodgers there at the running back position in Tampa. He hasn't done anything amazing, but he's been very steady for him. And they get Doug Martin back this week, who there were a lot of good reports from him over in the offseason that he looks quicker, he looks stronger than he's ever showed up to camp for. And I expect it'll be a timeshare at first at least. And at some point, Doug Martin should be able to take it over. But that'll really help them to have a consistent running game that they've lacked when Doug Martin is injured or has his down seasons. And they're still not where this Tampa team is still not where I thought they'd be, that I thought they could be a much better team. They're barely pulling out a win against an 0-4 Giants team, although I feel like they're a better team than 0-4. I don't see them continuing to be at the very bottom of the league like this. But this Tampa team, I'm still having a hard time with. I was very excited going into the season, and they just haven't impressed me like I thought they would.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that for sure. I mean, Deshaun Jackson, for one, I think he's a player you look at and you wonder kind of when are they going to get him going? I mean, this is a guy that only has 9 receptions and 1 touchdown so far on this short season. He was kind of a little frustrated on Sunday, rightfully so, isn't getting the ball. And that's kind of the way he gets when he doesn't get the ball. 9 receptions, that's not going to make anyone happy, especially him. So, yeah, I mean, look, you got to remember this is a team that is kind of just trying to get their feet underneath them with, not the starters not playing a ton of preseason. They don't play week 1, and now this is they've only played 3 games versus other teams that have played 4. So, I think they'll eventually get it going. Nice to see them bounce back and get a win, albeit in a close one after what the performance they had a couple weeks back against Minnesota. And then the Giants, I agree with you. I don't think they're a doormat in the NFL, but I still don't think they're a very good team. I don't think this is a team that's going to rip off 3-4 wins in a row at any point this season. I just think they are what they are at this point. The offense just continues to try and go through Eli Manning, throwing the ball 50 times a game. That just doesn't work. And look, the defense, for what it's worth, the last couple weeks, the defense is kind of supposed to be their calling card, but giving up 24, 27, 25 points, you kind of need that number to get a little lower and not so high towards the 30s there. So, yeah, tough sledding for New York. Ben McAdoo, I wonder how short of a leash that guy has at this point.
And quick little note there with the Giants running backs. Wayne Gallman ended up leading them in carries. He had 11 rushes for 42 yards. Nothing that really stands out or anything like that. But compared to the rest of their running backs, Paul Perkins averaged 1.4 yards per carry as their starter. Shane Vereen, he's much more of a receiving back. He got 5 rushes for 14 yards, less than 3 yards per carry. So that's a position. Wayne Gallman's getting his chance here, and we'll see if he can take that over. And I don't see him being real significant to their team, but that could be something that helps out with some fantasy teams, that he gets a little more action. And at receiver and tight end, Odell Beckham continues to be good. He had 90 yards. And then Evan Ingram, he's definitely impressed as a rookie. He had 6 catches, 62 yards. They targeted him 11 times. As you said, with Eli Manning throwing the ball 49 times, almost 50 times there in the game. So he did get a lot of action throughout that.
Yeah, for sure.
So moving on to another unfortunate injury. Oakland lost the game to Denver Broncos 16-10, and also their starting quarterback, Derek Carr, who's probably going to be out about a month here. And they had E.J. Manuel, former first-round pick, come in and get some action there at quarterback. But this is the second week in a row they didn't show up and really do much. They lost to the Redskins last week. This game was at least close that they lost by just 6, but to only put up 10 points. Marshawn Lynch was disappointing. He had 9 rushes for just 12 yards. Amari Cooper, disappointing once again. He had two catches for just 9 yards. This team needs a lot more from some of those players they're supposed to be counting on.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, they definitely need some guys to step up. Definitely need some guys to step up now with, Derek Carr being out. And you wonder kind of where things go. And do they try to lean on Marshawn Lynch more? Because E.J. Manuel looked, albeit thrown into the fire there, didn't look very good last week, filling in there when he did have his chance to go in. But, you wonder, where exactly the Raiders are at and kind of where they're at mentally. Can the defense step up and win them some games? They tried to do that on Sunday against the Broncos, didn't quite have enough, but you wonder where that goes. So it'll be interesting to see because he's out anywhere Derek Carr is from 2 to 6 weeks. Let's just pick the middle ground, say 4, and say he's out a month. That's tough. You're 2-2. It'd be a lot better if you were 3-1 or 4-0. With him, missing some time, but you're 2-2. Can't afford to slip up too many games here. So Raiders really have their work cut out for them. Then the Broncos, man. What can you say about the Broncos? This is another team I was wrong on. I was wrong on. Who was I wrong on? I forget the team I was wrong on.
You were high on the Chargers, I know, in that division.
Right, that's the team. Yes, I had these two teams completely flip-flopped. I thought the Chargers were going to be a lot better than they were. Was completely wrong with them, and I thought the Broncos were going to take a little step back with kind of uncertainty at the quarterback position. But what this defense is doing, dude, unreal. Very similar to Clemson. We talked about Clemson at the beginning of the show. Very similar to them. The defense is just carrying them. Just game after game. It's astounding. Listen to these numbers here, okay? The Broncos faced 4 very good running backs so far this season. Melvin Gordon, Ezekiel Elliott, LaShawn McCoy, and Marshawn Lynch. Those 4 running backs combined rushed for 95 yards against the Broncos.
Wow.
Melvin Gordon with 54 of those 95 yards. Ezekiel Elliott had 8. LaShawn McCoy had 21. Marshawn Lynch had 12. That's astounding. That almost just doesn't seem like that should be real. That's unreal what the Broncos are doing. And if they keep that up and the way they can get after the passer, Broncos will be they'll if they can get something out of their offense consistently week after week, they're going to be a team that's going to be right there going down to the wire. And it should be a fun battle seeing them take on Kansas City because they still have to face Kansas City twice, which should be fun, one of which is a home game to close out the regular season. Got to think that game's going to mean something.
I agree. And the number one guy I didn't mention earlier that the Broncos have been relying on offense has been C.J. Anderson. He had a 95-yard game in this one against Oakland, and he's number 4 in the league. Number 4 in the league there in rushing right now, and should be able to easily move ahead of Dalvin Cook now that he's out for the season, up to 3 in these coming weeks, as he's been very, very consistent for him, and they've really relied on him to carry that offense.
Yeah, 4.5 yards a carry. Extremely impressive.
So I watched a little bit of this next game when the Seahawks took on the Colts, and it was actually very, very close early on. The Colts were up 15-10 at one point just before halftime, and then the Seahawks just took over and blew them out. It finished out 46-18. The Seahawks scored the final 4 touchdowns to really take over. This Colts team has a hard time without Andrew Luck there. And the Seahawks team, these last 2 weeks, they're finally starting to come around and look like a potentially top team, even though they're only 2-2 record-wise right now. They're looking much, much better. Russell Wilson had it over an 80% completion percentage this week. 21 for 26, threw for 295 yards. Although he did throw for 2 interceptions, he still did have 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher previously inactive Eddie Lacy had to step up when Chris Carson had a season-ending injury there, which is unfortunate for him. He was playing well, kind of out-of-nowhere guy that really took over this week. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that Seattle running back position moving forward. But that's one thing they did well. They stacked a lot of running backs, and I expect they'll still be fine at that position moving forward.
Yeah, look, it's nice to see Seattle offensively get a little on track, so to speak, and I mean, albeit it was against Indianapolis, who, takes over the top spot for worst defense in the league from the Patriots. Going into the Sunday night game, the Patriots were number one, giving up 32 points per game, like we talked about. And then with the just abysmal performance defensively by Indy on Sunday night, they take the top spot. They're giving up 34 points per game defensively now on this short season. So pretty pathetic there by Indianapolis. They have a whole world of problems. But, hey, not all is lost. Andrew Luck's starting back practicing this week. So it shouldn't be too much longer now before he's back and kind of giving them a little bit of a spark and a lift. I mean, he's their leader. He's their best player. So that's obviously the best thing that Indy can ask for at this point.
And we'll move on to our last game, which finished with our only currently still undefeated team, the Kansas City Chiefs, pull out a win against the Washington Redskins. 29-20, but that game was closer than it seems. There's kind of a silly touchdown at the end where they tried some pitch and catch stuff with the Redskins, and the Chiefs ended up scoring a meaningless touchdown with no time left. It was really more like a 23-20 game that it was right before that happened. And the biggest thing that stands out on this Chiefs team, rookie Kareem Hunt continues to just dominate. He has been fantastic from the start of the season until now, and it doesn't look like he's going to take any steps backwards as of right now. He's currently leading the league in rushing, and it's not close. He's over 500 yards, 502 yards. Number 2 is Todd Gurley with 362. So he's 140 yards ahead of the next rusher behind him. He just 21 rushes, 101 yards here. Didn't have a touchdown on the ground there at all. Also through the air, he had 4 receptions for 20 yards. They're relying on him. He's just really stood out here. I've been so impressed.
Listen to this stat. Kareem Hunt has more yards in the second half of games this season than the second. So the second leading rusher in the NFL is Todd Gurley. He has more yards in the second half of games this year than Todd Gurley has yards all season.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. Some crazy stats right there, and that's Kareem Hunt's been fantastic, and the Chiefs team, look, they keep rolling. I mean, they get down 10-0 in that game. I mean, Washington scores on the opening possession on a long pass to Terrell Pryor, and they had a field goal then later. And look, you could do one of two things there at home. You could say, well, it's just not our night. It is what it is. Washington's kind of on a roll. They just beat our rival Raiders last week. But no, they came back and they got a big touchdown from Travis Kelce, and then they seal it with a field goal late and then the meaningless touchdown. So kudos to them. They keep finding ways to win one way or the other. And it's a tough loss for the Redskins. So that was a game that they could easily have had, and they fought at 2-2. So pretty entertaining game, though. I watched a decent amount of it while I could stay awake.
Yeah, I agree. I watched a good amount of the first half and a little bit of the third quarter. Just two quick notes, mostly out of entertainment purposes. First off, the box score of this game, like I mentioned, the last play of the game, they got made it a 9-point game for Kansas City with no time left. It's just kind of funny to see it in the box score that they listed the entire string of events. And nice. I'm going to read it to you for today. So
go ahead.
This was obviously this isn't in the box score. This was Jamison Crowder, who's been a huge disappointment this year. His only catch of the game. And this is what happened. Kirk Cousins passed to Jamison Crowder to the right for a 7-yard loss. Jamison Crowder fumbled, Jordan Reed recovered the fumble for a 2-yard loss. Lateral to Chris Thompson. Chris Thompson fumbled. Justin Houston recovered the fumble and returned for 13-yard touchdown. 2-point attempt failed. Alex Smith run to the right. So all of that happened on the last play of the game to give Kansas City that extra 6 points there.
Wow, that's crazy. That is so crazy. That and it's funny that game actually changed hands in a lot of bettors' eyes last night too, because the line in that game was Kansas City minus 6 or 7, depending on what line you got, and Washington's covering that whole game until that shit show happens at the end. If you bet Kansas City, you rejoice and you go play the lottery, and if you bet the Redskins, you go jump off a bridge. So, but thus is the life of bettors. So, definitely an interesting and a big play at the end of that game last night.
And one other quick note there at the running back position for the Chiefs that I thought was funny. They have Kareem Hunt. We talked about how great he is as their starting running back. One of their backup running backs is Akeem Hunt, which I didn't realize until he took a pass to the face that they tried to throw it to him. I was trying to figure out why Kareem Hunt had a different number because I'm used to him being 27. I watched all but their week 3 game that he's played in. And all of a sudden, their running back, Hunt, comes out of the backfield, and legitimately the pass hit him in the helmet, and he couldn't bring it in. And I was like, what is Kareem Hunt doing? Wait, that's not Kareem Hunt.
Wait a second. That is not him.
Yeah, that was just an entertaining thing that their backup has the exact same last name and a similar first name. Almost, it's just missing an R, and you could switch around the letters, and it makes Kareem Hunt. But Akeem Hunt
absolutely
backing up Kareem Hunt.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Hopefully nobody accidentally drafted Akeem instead of Kareem in their fantasy drafts there.
Epic fail, right?
Thank you so much for listening to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. We really appreciate it. We've changed some things up based on some of the feedback we've received, so we'd love to continue hearing your feedback. As we continue to build this platform with our podcast, it's very helpful to us if you can share it with the people you know that you think would be interested. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great week.